Hello, and welcome to Magic is Real, a podcast focused on the fascinating world of near-death experiences, spirit communication, and all things metaphysical and spiritual. The mission of this project is to share messages of hope and inspiration with others, and to spread the word that death is only an illusion. Thank you for being here with an open heart and mind. I wish you peace, light, and love always. Hello, Magic is Real listeners. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new here, this is Magic is Real. This is a podcast on which we discuss spiritually transformative experiences, all things metaphysical, spiritual journeys, spirit communication. And today I have with me Dr. Nicole Gruel from Australia.
Hi.
Hi, welcome, Nicole. And I am very honored to have her here. She is a speaker, an author, a transformational coach, and is involved with IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which I am loosely very involved with too. So welcome and thank you so much for being here. You are a near-death experiencer, but I do want to talk about who you are and what it is today in this moment, the kind of work that you do. I'd love to hear what you're into.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shannon, for having me. Well, in a nutshell, I really help people who have had, I wouldn't even say help anymore. I walk with people who have had spiritual experiences who want to harness the gifts that have come out of those experiences. They want to understand what the F just happened to me. What was that thing or those series of things? And who am I now as a result of that? And maybe I want to shift the way I do things and how I walk the world. And so this is the direction I'm going to go now. And so there's like in-depth processes, and then there's very grounded kind of let's get your feet on the ground and let's ground some of that up here stuff and bring it on down so that it's here on planet Earth in the physical, practical, and because I find people that have had these spiritually transformative experiences, myself included, we can often get caught up in the more, upper, the heart, the throat, the ether, the cosmic things, right? And sometimes at the cost and at the neglect of the earthly things, like how's my body doing on my health? How are my finances? How are my relationships right now? How is my living quarters and where I am and the physical place that I'm surrounded in? How is my life path? These grounded things from day to day that are hugely ordinary and very repetitive in many ways and very mundane is, I find, where the greatest magic actually takes place. And so that's strangely enough is the stuff that gets me really excited. And why? Because when we get enough people who are living their magic, that's what it comes down to. They're just living their magic, doing their thing. When you know it in one person, it's incredible. But when you get a bunch of people together who are all doing that, we humans have no idea what we are capable of. We haven't got there yet. And I'm really excited to see that happen. I want to see that happen more. And so it's kind of very selfish too. I just want to see what's going to happen because I want a better world. I want a more beautiful world. I want that for my kids. I want that for people who I know live in misery every day. I think we can do so much better on the planet. And I know that these transformative experiences that many of us have access to are like this potent key that we can use to help us achieve that. So I'm all about the unlocking that key stuff.
I love it. I am too. And I just love the way that you worded all of that. So I know that you had your near-death experience when you were very young. But I still want to know what led you to this place. I know it was your NDE, but I think that who a person is really informs their experiences on the other side or in the other realm, and then upon their return. And I also read that you come from a long line of samurai, which is a
Mhm.
fascinating thing. And I'd love to hear about sort of your childhood, your family, what your life was like before you had this experience and what your spiritual beliefs may have been up until
Mm.
that point.
So, because I have a Japanese side of the family, my mother's side is Japanese, my father's side is French. And the Japanese have a very animistic way of being, which is, they understand all of life to have life force energy in it. And so this is like very indigenous cultures operate in the same way. There is spirit in the rivers and the trees and the rocks, so everything is alive with life force energy. So that part was naturally cultivated in me from the Japanese side of just being, and I had a strong connection to my Japanese side. But I didn't grow up with any set pathway or religion as such. Nothing was imposed upon me in any way, and nothing was even presented for me. When I was 7 years old, I asked my father, what God do I believe in? I don't know where that question came from, but something in me was obviously seeking an answer and some structure and guidance. And so I asked, what God do I believe? And he gave me the biggest blessing and curse of my early life, which was the answer, darling, anything you want to believe. And as a 7 year old, I just wanted an answer, right? Tell me my pathway, Dad. No, he was like, go and explore, ask good questions and go and explore and figure things out for yourself. And now, as a big person looking back on all that, I can see why, that kind of answer came in the approach. And I'm grateful. I'm nothing but grateful for it. So my early years were very open. I had connection to, I could feel presences, but I didn't know what they were and I didn't like them. So I remember as a young kid, I would always sleep with my blanket covering like right up to my chin. It would cover my neck because I had this feeling that something would either grab my neck or want to hold my neck, but it was always my neck that I was protecting. And I would go to sleep at night with my blanket, even when it was warm weather up like this, because I could just sense presences around. I couldn't see them, I couldn't hear them, but I could sense. And I didn't have any tools as a kid to kind of have boundaries around that, right? Like, no, you can't be here, and etc. So, but again, I was a kid. That was all normal and natural, right? Because that was just my experience, and I assume that's what everyone else does, as we all do when we grow up. And so I hungered and I yearned for some kind of a pathway. But when I had my near-death experience at 14, I can't say that I had any set thing aside from gravitating towards little bits and pieces here and there, but nothing set. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate the way that your father raised you. It was very similar to mine, where my one of my good friends went to Methodist church and I really liked her, so I told my parents, I want to go to church. And my father is agnostic, I mean, atheist, and my mother's always been pretty non-actively spiritual, but definitely open to all of this and supports me in my mediumship so much. We just don't talk to my dad about it and that sort of thing. But she was always sort of just, it wasn't a big thing. And I said, I want to go to church. And she said, well, I guess we should go just because and I said, well, sort of what's the truth? And she said, some people believe this, some people believe that. Here's the children's Bible for you to read. I loved the stories. And she took me to church, but she and my dad got bored there at the Methodist church. And they finally, my mom said, well, my dad was out. And she said, well, I just want you to have a sense of community. So let's go to the Unitarian church. So
Mhm.
they were in service and I was upstairs in Sunday school reading the Tao of Pooh. And I played Rosa Parks. I played Rosa Parks in the Christmas pageant because I grew up in Westport, Connecticut. There were no black kids in our church, but it was just a very, I don't even know that we stayed super long, but there were Jewish kids there. There were kids from all denominations. So I really appreciated that. And then I was allowed to take my own path. I went to atheism, agnosticism. Now I'm a spiritualist. It just kind of all unfolded that way.
Nice,
So I think
nice.
that's so great. So what happened when you were 14? 14? Did I
Right,
get the age
14.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
14. So I had a near-death experience via drowning.
Did?
So I did, I did. So I was over in New Zealand, whitewater rafting, and we went down this, I think in the US you would call it 32 feet. So it's
Mhm.
10 meters. It's high. It was very big waterfall. And at the bottom, the raft tipped, and I tipped out. And because I grew up a swimmer, I had the swimmer's response. You know, I put my arms out to swim, and all of this gushing water just kind of went, whoosh, pushed me straight down into blackness, like the blackest water ever. And I open my eyes and I look around, and I don't know which way is up or down. You know, that was just black water. And it was so strange, you know, that vertigo, because then I didn't know which way to swim. And I realized there was no point in even trying to swim because I didn't know which way I was going. And so very quickly, I had this moment of panic. It was, I'm going to have, this is my last breath. And there was panic associated with that. And then straight after that moment was total calm. And I don't remember like spluttering or breathing in water or nothing like it. Was just the thought, right? This is my last breath. And then it got very calm. And in that calmness, just 100% calmness, and with this black water around me, I saw a horizon of light open up. And if you've ever seen the movie Ghost, from a
Yes,
long
I
time
have.
ago with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore, and there's that scene where, you know, they're reunited towards the end. That's the closest thing I've ever seen on screen to represent this. And I bawl every time. I don't watch the movie often, but when I have seen it, I bawl, because it's like, it's a knowing, right? It's a familiarity. And so there was this horizon of light. It was soft, but it was bright. And towards it was my then living grandmother. So this is where the samurai story comes in. So she was the bloodline of the samurai. And next to her came my then deceased first dog, who was like my sibling, because I grew up without, you know, siblings. And so I was very close to that dog and very attached. So I had a living and a non-living being approach. And my thought was, this is unusual. What are you doing here? Because I was 14. And I'm like, this is a bit different. And then here, a male voice, very clear, just said, Nicole, remember to breathe. And with that, the kind of the recollection here of the thinking brain kicked in. And I remembered the instructions from that morning, which was, you know, you have to curl up like a ball, because we had the life jackets on. And so I did that, and up I popped like a little cork, went from the dark green to the light green up to the white bubbles. And when I came up at the white bubbles, I was at like the mouth of a cave. And I was really lucky, like the mouth of a kind of crevice. So I'm lucky I had my near death and not my death experience that day. I'm very grateful for that too. And then, you know, I got plucked out of the water. The day was over. I was glad that kind of, you know, I didn't drown that day, and I carried on. There was no deep processing. There was no major revelation. There was no aha. There was, you know, not like a lot of adults who have their experiences and then have to readjust the paradigm. I just walked on with my life. I just carried on as it was, because again, as a child, I just took it all in as part of the experience of being, and it wasn't unusual, or I didn't have to question it. And it really wasn't until my later life that I started looking back at that experience going, oh, that was pretty important back there. That doesn't happen every day. So
Yeah.
the hindsight came much later down the road. Yeah.
And then I'm just curious about the physical aspect of how they have to do CPR? Did you just cough up,
No,
or how did you not, how
I
did you,
popped up and took breath.
and
So
that was it?
that was it. And they think I was under for a couple of minutes. Nobody was timing, because, you know, they're looking for everybody there. No one's looking
Yeah,
at their watch. But I was told it was probably about a couple of minutes, and that was it. I was fine. I was
that's
totally fine.
incredible.
Yeah.
And even though yours, like you said, just felt sort of quick, and it actually just hit me sort of harder than a lot of these do, in the sense that because it's so quick, it's so succinct, and it's so specific. And there are people that say, when this happens, it's just a trick of the mind. But everybody sees the same, not the exact same thing. The fact that you saw a light, and then you see your grandmother and your dog. Now, if this was a hallucination, you could have seen anything. You could have seen, why would it be that of all things that everybody else sees? Not everyone gets to that place of seeing loved ones,
Yeah.
but the fact that it's like you just peeked behind a curtain for a second. And that's what I find is almost more profound. Like you just saw a little glimpse and it feels as though it was set up. And I'd love to know your thoughts for you to later revisit when the time was right, because this was your soul's purpose.
Mm.
So you go on with your life. And I guess from a spiritual perspective, has anything changed? Are you still just kind of trucking along? Have you ever told anybody about this during your teenage years, or did you just kind of shrug it off and and go on with being a teenager?
Yeah. I think I did just shrug it off and carry on with being a teenager because my teenage years were pretty turbulent. So I had a father who had substance abuse issues. I lost my father very soon after that as well. So I had this 6-month window where after my near-death experience, I experienced the death of my father, the sudden death of my father on the other side of the planet. And I had a lot of rage close to that happening. So we were not on good terms. And I lost a couple of other family members. So it was like a boom, boom, boom effect. And so I wasn't processing spiritual experiences. I was processing grief in a very immature way, as a teenager does. You know, I turned to substances myself, and I just had a lot of big, strong emotions because that's what, you know, we do as teenagers.
It is what I
And
did when I was a teenager too.
yeah, yeah. And eventually I turned to the pathway that made the most sense to me, that clicked, was yoga. I hit a yogic pathway and I was really fortunate. It wasn't like the yoga in the gym kind of yoga. I mean, I went deep. I went into ashrams, and it became a whole lifestyle. In, you know, from morning to night, everything, every waking moment became about that yogic way of being. And I think what that gave me was a really grounded sense, because I'd been quite ungrounded, you know, as a kid, and didn't really feel a strong sense of home or belonging. So the yogic way of life made a lot of sense to me, and I pursued that. It gave me clarity, and it helped ground, I think, a lot of experiences that I thought were just part of my being, but I later realized are quite spiritual experiences. So I've always had a really open third eye. And again, you know, late teen years when I dabbled with a bit of acid as well, that just like got it going on a whole other level of crazy, right? And I stopped doing that because I realized it was too full on.
Yeah.
But when I then started having similar experiences through meditation in yoga, now I was like, whoa, whoa, okay. This is definitely unusual. And I realized then these were some of the keys where I realized we can actually access these abilities normally as human beings. We don't need, you know, plant medicine, psychedelics, etc. These are like accelerated doorways to experience these things, but we don't need those things, because when we truly ground ourselves, we can access those doorways in other ways, right? So all of that and that pathway really helped bring my experiences together. And so I had a splattering of spiritually transformative experiences over throughout really my teens, my 20s, and some really big ones. I describe them as big bang experiences with constellations of stars all over the place. So like all of these other small ones, which would take forever to go into all of them, and I don't even recall all of them. But the big bangs I certainly remember, because those were like poignant markers, you know, in the journey. So that near-death experience, I later realized, was probably my first big bang that happened, right? And I have two others that really marked the way. I can share them if you want me to.
I do, because I want to, and there's so much in there I want to talk about. And I do, because just for the viewers and listeners to sort of understand what you mean by what is that, how do you experience that, you know, as opposed to meditating and sort of seeing in your mind's eye some stuff. How does it feel when it's happening to you?
Yeah, totally. Well, so the second big bang, then you heard about the first, was pretty brutal actually. And So I'd always had, you'll get this as a woman. I mean, I had menstrual issues, right, each month. And so when they would
Me
come
too.
on, my body would have these awful reactions, and I would have to hide away and shut away and make everything dark and silent because everything was really amplified. And I've never fainted, but I've been told that what I'm experiencing is like that moment before you faint. So I just never actually fainted, but everything just became amplified and just uncomfortable. So I would hang out in that zone for like a whole day, and maybe it would have been better if I just would have fainted, but I would hang out in that zone for a day. And I guess because my blood pressure was dropping so much. So this was quite normal for me. Each month I knew this was happening, but for some reason, this particular cycle, it was way more full on. And so I roughly knew what was going on. I lay down on the couch, and there were some other big things that had happened in my life. I'd closed down a business. I had outer world closings that were going on, right? And so here's my body now kind of moving stuff out of the system. And so as I'm lying there on the couch, what then took place was 3 days of ordinary and non-ordinary spontaneous experiences. And if you would have seen me from the outside, I'd look like a girl lying on the couch with a sweat and a fever. But what was going on the other realms was both shamanic in flavor. It was going down into my roots. It was meeting ancestors. It was healing things in my ancestral path. I kind of went down my left side and I went down my right side. So going down the mother line and going down the father line, and just these pretty epic journeys to meet characters from my past that were part of my DNA and part of my story, but I just didn't know it. But they all held pieces of stuckness that had come through my DNA that I needed to address and resolve in the present moment in this bodied form, right? And then it was also Kundalini like in nature. There was also a shifting of energies that was moving up and clearing through the system. But it wasn't like this kind of love, light, Kundalini, beautiful rainbow journey. I call it the dark side of the chakras. That's how I experienced it. It was like wading through molasses. It was thick, it was dark, it was difficult. And at each of those points, there were things in my system that needed clearing. I was going through this major spontaneous clearing. There were childhood traumas, there were pretty much everything, every ick, hard, difficult experience in this lifetime, and maybe others, but certainly in this lifetime that I'd ever been through, was being processed in that experience. So for 3 days, this thing happened. And, my mother, I was at my mom's house. My mother had actually said to me, you need to go to hospital. This is not right. And fortunately, by that time, I'd been on the yogic journey a while. I'd, done a bit of, I understood that there was some spiritual stuff that can take place. And so I was saying to her, I don't know what's happening, but something important is taking place. So I need to just do this. And so bless her, as much as she was very worried, she just let me be on this couch for 3 days doing this thing. And towards the end of the process, the only way I can describe it is the peeling of an onion, peeling of the layers. And as it got towards the end of the process, the peeling of the layers just became faster and faster and like more kind of brutal. And each layer was one piece of my own identity. So for example, my name is Nicole was one layer of the onion. And then as soon as I said that, like psychically said that my name is Nicole, whoosh, that layer of the onion got ripped off. Okay, I am girl on couch. Whoosh, that got ripped off, right? So this was terrifying because me, this thing that I know as me, I was desperately grasping on to anything at all that I could. And everything just kept getting taken. And that continued faster and faster until all that was left was this teeny, 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 tiny prick of light. That was it. Nothing more, nothing less than this tiny prick of light. And I knew in that moment that this is all I am. This is it. And with that knowing, now came all of these other kind of ahas after that, right? And so the big one that really transformed my life at that point was, if that is all I am, this pinprick of light, anything beyond that is a co-created construct. Anything beyond that is the great game of life. it's playful, it's something I can change, it's something I can be a change agent in, it's a construction, it's an archetypal form, right? Anything beyond that pinprick of light. And there was something immensely, the reason it was so transformative is it was immensely liberating. After that, I am none of all of these other things that I've called myself, or I thought I was, or I locked myself into up until this point in time. In fact, I'm none of it, and I'm all of it at the same time. And I have the freedom to change it if I want to. So I became very light and playful. I think I've always had a kind of light and playful vibe about me anyway, but something about that transformation took me to a whole new level of playfulness. And not that I am not serious about things in life. Anyone who knows me well knows that I can, I dive deep into things that I think matter, that matter to me. And I get very serious about issues, and I go to very dark places, very hard places with people. And I think it's because that lightness came about, and the ability to see that we can play and manipulate in that space who we are and what we do, and the energies that we involve ourselves with. It gave me the ability to then not call something eternally good or bad, to not lock into these constructs, but to understand that it is all merely experience. It's phenomena and it's experience. It's stuff that happens that we go through. We can call it good or bad if we want to. It can feel pleasant or unpleasant, but at the end of the day, it's phenomena and experiences that happen. And so that's been a really helpful way to approach my own life. It took me years then to ground that in my own way. I mean, the language that I'm sharing with you now, of course, I didn't have this kind of language straight after the experience, right? This comes after years of understanding what happened to me, with working with hundreds of other people that have had these experiences, with working with organizations that talk about this stuff and know they've done research in it, know how to classify it. This is where the language comes to then assist other people as well in saying, oh, this might have been what happened, right? And isn't that interesting? And we can look at it these different ways. So that's kind of how it can feel to have one of those experiences deeply embodied, right? And also that particular one was very visionary, but also an embodied experience. And then do you want me to share I guess the third big bang?
I
Because it is
do, and that was gonna be my question, just, when you said you were very much embodied in the physical experience and yet still having this, I don't even know what you call it. There's not really a word for it, I think. But I was gonna ask, is it like when you have a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, whatever the cause of it is, like, are you sort of in another realm and it's very real, like this is real and you're seeing it all? Or was your experience more psychic, telepathic knowledge of just, I don't really know what's happening, but like the way that I receive mediumship information, it's just like my own thought. It's not like, I always wished back in the day when I thought, oh, it'd be so fun to be a medium. It must be so cool because I thought like, oh, they're seeing spirits. And some people do.
yeah.
But no, when I do a reading, it's just like, I don't know how I know this. It's just came to me. It's just, this just seemed right. So I'm just going to say it. So it sounds like it was sort of a meeting of the two kind of experiences, but I'd love to know before, and I do want to hear your next experience as well.
Yeah. It wasn't out of body, as
Yeah.
in there I am and another part of me has gone somewhere else. I was very much in my body. I would call it visionary, in that I was in my body, I was aware of my body, and I was seeing things in front of me that if you were sitting next to me on the couch, you would not have seen. But,
Hmm.
well, I don't know, maybe you have other abilities. Maybe you might have, I don't know, we could have had a shared experience. But most people sitting there on the couch would not have seen what I was seeing in that moment. And yet, as clear as my eyes can see now, I was seeing these things. So in a way, it was like other realms, but it was connected through this realm. So I was still very here, but it was like I was just seeing more of what was always there. I just couldn't see it before.
Mhm.
And now all of a sudden my psyche was ready. And this is what I think is it's so magical about the body mind spirit system. it is eternally patient with us, because our body goes through everything, every trauma, every moment, every experience, right? The body remembers it all from pre-birth. Yeah. But we're so busy in the world that we don't remember or recall all of this stuff usually. And in the quiet times when the awake mind is ready, it's like these other pieces from the subconscious and the unconscious can come forward, and the deep memory can just come and be present. And so for me, it was like an avalanche of all of that, all within the 3 days. So I think there was a level of readiness in my being, but it just happened so quick that some people might call it a spiritual emergency, in the fact that it just happened so fast. I was not functional in my physical form for days afterwards. Actually, I like, even when I finally did go outside, I remember one point going to the supermarket, and I think I was like clinging onto my mother, walking through the aisle where there were like dairy products and like the fridge and fridge items, and looking at this whole wall of butter, like, why is there so much butter? Like, just these kinds of moments were happening afterwards, right? So it took me a bit of time to step back out into the world and kind of function normally. And that these are classic things in the spiritual emergency. So that kind of happened, but lucky for me, I didn't end up going to hospital, and so I didn't end up going down a whole different journey that people often do
Thank
go down,
Yeah,
right?
thank goodness they would have said she's having a psychotic break, she's bipolar, she's
Yeah,
schizophrenic, and
could have been
that
any of that.
sometimes is the case, and that wasn't the case. And yeah,
That's
I
right.
understand what you mean. And I also
That's right.
believe, just from all the prep work you did, first of all, I feel like you were one of those souls that were meant to be doing this work, which is why you were allowed a glimpse. But then you were doing all of this yoga and this meditation, which preps you to have sort of a Kundalini awakening, which my friend now, Jack, who was on the show, also had. Jack Morgan. I don't know if you've spoken with him, but he, you'll have to meet. He also had this violent, actually traumatic for him, and he was an atheist and began this meditation, and all of a sudden his was like deconstructing everything as well, and kind of came back shook. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so continue on with your story. I just
Yeah,
wanted to comment on that.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Um, yeah, the deconstruction completely. And then the reconstruction that can take place afterwards. And this is where the fun, can come into it. It's not
Yeah.
fun for everybody. It was fun for me, right? In terms of figuring out, well, who am I now? What do I
Yeah.
want to do now? Right? Where do I go?
Sure.
And then the big one, the third big one that happened was pretty recent, about 5 years ago. And I hadn't had any, big spiritual phenomena or experiences that had happened for quite some time. Um, but this was when I was birthing my first daughter. And it was a beautiful pregnancy, a natural pregnancy. Everything was fine and sweet. And I'm a very natural vibe nature girl. So I wanted to have an intervention free birth. And my waters broke. And then the hours went and the hours went and the hours went. And there was nothing much going on other than the labor pains. So 3 days of this went on, and the hospital was down the road. So we'd been checking in with the hospital because that's what you're meant to do once the waters break. Anyway, 90 hours later, and I tried everything. I was like with a midwife friend on the beach, and we were swaying our hips to the whales and the oceans, and I was doing all that, like everything. I was eating eggplant parmigiana because that was apparently a recipe, like just crazy stuff that you do, right? Because you just want to get it out at this stage. And but this little being was not coming. And so finally we made it to the hospital. They were all very worried at the hospital, and I caved to, yes, okay, let's do some kind of intervention, because then I started getting worried too. And as soon as drugs got into my system, so I was put on the happy gas first. And that's the stuff that the dentist used to, I think it's banned in America, but the dentist gives
I
you,
can
and it
still
numbs
smell
everything.
it from my
Oh,
childhood. It smelled like
wow.
oranges. It smelled like orange peels.
Okay. Okay.
I
I don't
had it
remember
in the
that.
early
Yeah.
80s. I can taste it in the back of my throat as you're saying
Wow.
this.
Okay. So they gave me the happy gas, and this was the first painkiller I'd had like in all of these hours. So I was on that thing, right? And I didn't let it go. I was like Darth Vader sucking this air in. And to the point where I actually think they turned the machine off at the wall because I wouldn't give the mask back. And so anyway, I'm sucking on this thing, and I had a spontaneous return to that same horizon of light from my near-death experience, which was like, wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Only the cool thing is, decades later now, I knew exactly where I was. I had language to talk about where I was, and a strange phenomena was taking place. I was physically present in the room, and one level of my consciousness was aware of the physical room with the machines and the midwives and my husband and all that stuff taking place. And there was another part of my consciousness that was at that horizon of light. So I had this split thing happening, but I didn't feel split in my body. And the part of me that was at the horizon of light knew that this was the most perfect experience for me. And it was actually funny. And I don't know how much of the happy gas was affecting my consciousness and spirit at that level, but that part of me was in hysterics at how ridiculous my whole human dance had been about, I have to have this natural birth, and it's going to be intervention free, and I'm going to do it my way, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to be stubborn over 90 hours to get through this. And here we are now, where I actually have to have a major intervention. And in that moment, I knew I had to agree to the cesarean, to an emergency cesarean, which was the one thing that I never, ever leaned into at all or even considered. So there was a part of my consciousness that just found all of this absolutely hilarious. This is so perfect for you, Nicole, great. I couldn't communicate the laughing, but the other part of me, I actually said the words to my husband. I've clarified, I thought it was my husband and my mum, but I've later clarified with them it was just my husband. I said, I think I'm having a near-death experience, and one of us might not make it, and it's going to be okay. And it just came out like that, plain as
Wow.
day from me, because I knew it was coming from the calmest place of truth, that that's how it was. And it was okay. No matter what the outcome was, it was going to be okay, because these are the things we know, right? When we're having these full-blown experiences. Now, of course, how that is to the receiver, my husband, is a different story that maybe he will tell one day. So the good news is, of course, once I made that decision that the emergency cesarean will happen, everything happens very quick in modern medicine. And 1 hour later, I had my baby in my arms at 3:33 p.m. We both
Oh,
made it.
wow.
We were both fine.
3:33.
3:33, and as it so happened, it was in a public hospital, but nobody else was around. I got a room to myself, and it was whale season, and so it was overlooking the ocean with whales, and so I just got to be in. We had complications, so I was in the room for like a week with this beautiful being, watching the whales, and just entering that way into a new chapter of our lives together. So and so it gave me time, of course, to reflect on that experience too, amongst all the other things. And one of the things that occurred to me was, and it happened in the aha knowing as well, was this experience with this child, this spiritual experience through birthing. I saw myself on stage in the future talking about it. So I knew that that particular experience was going to be something to share. And it felt to me that I walked out of that hospital, even though many people might call that a traumatic birthing experience, I walked out of that hospital with total peace, because there was something about the spiritual aspect that brought me full circle about that horizon of light. I felt like I'd come full circle. And the big cosmic joke, I laughed about it too, because I thought, oh, by that stage I'd finished my PhD. I'd, worked with hundreds of experiences. I was like collecting lots of stories. And so I'd become quite head-based about a lot of this stuff. I was with organizations. I had a lot of language around it. And I laughed at the universe. I'm like, okay, clearly I needed a refresher experience. Thank you very much. I'm great at talking about these things, but I had to have the refresher for myself to, fully embody. And I guess make me hopefully even more effective and empathic when I work with people, because once again, it's coming from that level of, I get it, I get you, you know, your experience is yours, mine is mine, but there's a level that I can understand you on, given I've also walked that path, right? um, so those are kind of the big bangs. And yeah.
And that, I assume, led you to sort of, well, all along you'd been exploring after the birth of your daughter. I'm sure you're pretty busy being a
Yeah.
mom, but were you continuing to seek out knowledge about why does this keep happening to me and what am I seeing here? And no?
Nope, nope. It's funny. I had been kind of done with spiritual practices in the form of like having a grounded practice of meditation or whatever, something like that. I'd been done for years. I hadn't done anything like that. I'd do it occasionally here or there. There was a time in my life, particularly my 20s, I was so devoted, right? I was really hardcore. And it was as though I liken it to almost training wheels. It's like I had to go through that and do the training wheels and do all of the practices and have all of that. But eventually, after so many experiences and so much grounding of all of that, I started to understand that the key is not the practices help lay the grounds, but the key is what is the knowing? What is the quality? What is the state that comes through all of that? Whether it's a chosen practice and pathway or whether it's a spontaneous spiritual experience, there's a state that is experienced in them. And then, now that that state is there, how can I ground that state more and more, live from that state more and more, enhance that state more and more, make my decisions from there and be. And when I talk states, I'm talking about things like joy, love, peace, these types of core human, cosmic, core human and spiritual states, really, that we have access to. And that ultimately, I think most of us want in our lives, if we get quiet enough. If you sit down with someone and you get quiet enough, what is it that you really want, and what's beneath that, and when you have that, what do you really want? And you dig and you dig and you dig beneath several layers, you often come to an answer which is like, I just want peace. Like,
Yeah.
I just want peace in my heart, or I just want to live love, and I want to be loved, and I want to share love, and or I just want a bit of joy and play. It's so simple. At our core, we are so incredibly simple. And so that knowing was like the aha that came from the experiences, and then how to ground that. And as I then did my academic studies, I understood that this was also the big aha that, many of the wisdom paths teach, that ultimately you can sit on any enlightened mountaintop that you want. You can have all of these experiences and do all of that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what matters is not what experience you had, it's how did you ground that experience, and what is the quality of human life that you applied. It's the action. It's the action of it. It's the resonance between two. And so this is where, that's why I love talking about things like not sticking your head in a spiritual sandpit and being all bliss, love, and light, but actually it's okay to be with the darkness. It's okay to look at things that cause us pain. Don't shut out from them, but actually what happens when we can open even more to them and lean into them and then transform and transmute them from that place. But we have to be grounded in our own being in order to do that. Otherwise, those things can really throw us off. And the reason why we protect ourselves is purely to protect ourselves. And that's understandable too, right? Because there's again, we are innately this divine design that we are part of. We are innately built in ways that are just so smart. And so we have self-protective mechanisms for a reason. There's a lot of people in the spiritual community that really poo-poo the ego. You have to annihilate it. You have to, and people speak badly about this thing that I have. It's my ego, and I have to, it's bad. It's a bad part of me. And, for me, I've always been like, look, if it's part of our design and part of our makeup, surely it must function in a particular way, right? So for me, the Jungian pathway made a lot of sense, because Jung really talked about this, the ego as an organizing point of consciousness. Again, not good, not bad, it's an organizing point of consciousness. So our awareness can come to it and we can operate through this. That's how you and I are having a conversation, because we have to engage some level of ourself that is coherent to actually do this thing right now. Otherwise, we're just, it's miraculous that we can all even communicate with each other. When you get down to how people are wired, how diverse we are, how complex we are, the different ways that we're seeing and experiencing the world, I'm amazed that we can, have coherence. And so I'm grateful for these points of consciousness that we have in this sense, an ego that can help us be coherent. And give us personality as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with having our quirks and having our unique patterns, because frankly, I think that's what makes us really interesting. If we're all this kind of one awakened globule of oneness, isness, which ultimately, perhaps is the truth of it. I'm not going to impose any truth on anyone. Discover your own truth for yourself. But if that is the case, which a lot of people like to talk about, yes, that's a lovely thing to strive to connect with and to achieve, because wisdom comes from that place and knowing of the interconnectedness of life comes from that place. But life is diverse as well, and this is like, I think, where we bump up against each other as humans, where we have the differences. This, once again, bringing it into the human form, this is the playground where the magic can happen. And it's not always pleasant and it's not always nice. And I speak with people all the time who want to check out from planet Earth, particularly if they've had these blissful experiences or been to some other realm that is heaven like. And they're like, Nicole, I just don't want to do Earth. Like, what is with this gig? This is way too hard. I don't think I signed up for this. And if I did, can I change my order? So I understand on that level that it's painful and hard, and yet it's the catalytic pot. It's where the transformations can happen. So if we can get our gumboots on and be brave and bold and step into it, eyes wide open, with all the crap that's going on in the world, it can be amazing as well.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's so funny. I just made a video about this that now I'm like, now I don't even want to, I'm going to post it, but I made a video about this. You just said it so much better than I did about, I have a friend who had a spiritually transformative experience. I keep talking about this. So if he watches this, hi bud. He just had a DMT spiritual experience, which again, I keep saying I don't endorse, I'm not telling people to use drugs or not use drugs. It's just a different way of having sort of a near death experience. And he was more agnostic, I would say, and was struggling with depression and things, and then just did this. And for weeks, he's just been like, I just want to shout at everybody, you're a miracle. Like he said, I finally understand what's going on here. And so
Wow.
he had asked me the other day, how do you stay in that? How do you, and he didn't mean, he understands that you don't need to be happy all the time, but he just said, when you fall out of that feeling, how do you find your heart center again? How do you come back to that place? And so I said, well, I answered him and then I made a video because I just to have extra kind of food for thought content. And that's what I had said to him is I don't think we're meant to be in a state of constant enlightenment and spirituality and Zen all the time. I think that it's in the darkness that we grow the most. And otherwise, why would we come here at all? Otherwise, we would just stay on the other side. The whole
Yeah.
point is to confront these dark parts of ourselves and the shadows and deal with the horrible things that happen in the world that are painful and sad and tragic and upsetting and offensive and all those things. But I think that's part of the journey is how we navigate it and how what we take from it and how we what we do about it, and
Yeah.
that's part of the growth. So I said, yeah, then I gave tips on, I mean, yeah, you can always kind of go back to it, but even just having that sense that this isn't all there is, I think is personally my secret. And also wanted to just quickly go back to something you said too. Again, not I must sound like I'm pro drugs, but I just have a curiosity because in college I did psychedelic drugs and yeah, went to Fish shows and all of that, and I went to the Grateful Dead shows with Jerry. aging myself. And I remember when I would take a hallucinogenic drug, whether it was psilocybin or acid, I thought, I kept saying, this is so interesting how the brain, like, how does this make it so that my brain is seeing things that aren't there? Like, I don't understand. I just remember, and I even told my mom this, so I'm out in the open now that I'm an adult. But I said I was looking at a cage with an iguana in it, and the cage started breathing, but not
Mm.
just breathing. I heard the breath going, and I was looking at it, knowing I was hallucinating, but it was real. Like, I was like, I'm hearing it, I'm seeing it. And I look up and I remember this. I'm in some apartment, some friend's apartment, some low life druggies that I shouldn't have been hanging out with. But I look over and they have this poster of Bob Marley hanging on the wall. It's the one where he's singing into a microphone and there are all these lions around at the bottom of the poster. And all of a sudden, the lions start walking, like fully walking the way that lions walk, not the way my brain thinks they walk, like they come to life. Bob turns around to me with his microphone and starts singing to me. And his
Wicked.
mouth is, and I'm like, and I'm not like psychotic. I'm fully aware that I'm hallucinating.
That's a
And I
good
was like,
trip.
yeah, I was like, that was one of the best. I mean, that's why I remember it, because it doesn't always happen like this. And I was like, okay, I know that's a poster. And yet, I mean, clear as day, that is a 3D image of a man. I see every pore on his face. He is singing to me. I thought at the time it was like a trick of the mind, like, oh, that must be now full circle. I'm seeing, at least this is my belief. The drug, again, I'm not endorsing drugs. I'm just saying, I think, because you can achieve this through, I actually don't even drink, but like I fully I believe now that it does something to sort of break the veil, where it's sort of showing you that things aren't quite what they seem, and that cage is breathing, or is it? It's kind of like, is that poster really just a poster? Is it real? And that's why I'm so interested in the topic of what these drugs do to allow you to see more than what's actually there. And I used to think of, because I was an atheist at the time, like, oh, well, it's just some kind of chemical reaction that makes you see things and imagine things. But then now I'm kind of going, well, is it though? Is it, or was it opening a portal to seeing that all these things we think are material, like a solid, they're really just atoms. We know this, that it's not really hard surfaces. And so perhaps I'm able to perceive that this could be solid, or it could be, or abracadabra, it could be something else. It could be just floating, protons. Is that the word? So I just, again, I think you can achieve these. I meditate all the time and I kind of trip out as I'm letting images come into my field of view and my thoughts, and I try to listen to spirit. And I do it almost every night, because to me that's my glass of wine that people have. I can't drink because of migraines, but some people have a glass of wine. Some people, I lay there and like trip out on spirit. It's really cool. It's not as cool as your, it's not as vivid as what you saw. And again, you said it came with some sort of maybe potholes, but anything you'd like to say about that, you can. I just kind of wanted to, I love that topic. So I
Yeah,
find it really interesting.
and I think it's an important topic as well, because
Yeah.
especially plant medicines are really popular right now, and a
Yeah.
lot of people are doing it in ways that aren't always facilitated well,
Yeah.
or responsibly. And so what's happening as a result is, there are many people out there who are having awakenings via plant medicine and unable to ground it or understand. I spoke with
Yeah.
someone just the other day who actually had a really great life beforehand and didn't need to pursue anything spiritually. They were quite spiritually open already, but wanted to support a friend, and ended up, going over and doing some ayahuasca ceremonies, and in that process was not perhaps supported as well as they could have been, and has now come back and is feeling pretty rotten about life in many ways, like, why can't I get back to where I was? And so it's not a magical door
Yeah.
for it's not always going to be the best experience. People hear about good experience and say, oh well, I'd like to try that. And you know, like your friend that you mentioned before, there's a lot of research being done right now, and good research, good quality research, especially with MAPS, and into the benefits, the healing benefits, you know, that these psychedelics have for things like, you know, depression,
Yeah.
anxiety, trauma, etc. And a lot of great findings are coming out of that. And so, you know, people are experimenting with microdosing in controlled environments, which, you know, is another whole conversation too, side conversation, because it's not always necessarily held in a sacred space, and
Right.
honoring the plant and the medicine in the sacred way that the ancients have done, right? So, you know, or the same way that cannabis has been, you know, legalized in so many places, but the government's growing it. And so really, like, what's the quality of that? Where's the sacredness in that, right? Is that really
Yeah.
something that you want to get involved in that way? So there's a lot of potholes, as you said before, in this conversation. And it's not to say there are not loads of benefits and amazing experiences that can come out of it. And the veil certainly can become thinner in opening our minds to the fact that there might be more. Um, yes, that does all happen. And it also comes with a big warning flag of use your discernment, trust your gut. This is your experience, be responsible, you know,
Yeah.
so and tap into your knowing, because at the end of the day, you're involving yourself with something that can alter and interfere with your psychosomatic spiritual system, right? And so if you haven't grounded yourself in some ways, if you haven't informed yourself in some ways, if you haven't connected with people who can hold you when you're going to be in a very vulnerable state, and at your deepest level, you need to be able to trust that space. So this gets very
Yeah.
instinctual as well. If some of those things aren't met, then I would really say walk with caution, you know, because the other side of that is that some negative experiences can happen. There's even been, you know, people who have had plant medicine and ended up murdering each other out in, you know, out in the wilderness. This is not what's supposed to happen, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what you're going to do, but I'm just really waving a warning flag
Yeah.
around that. So I'm very much like you in the same way of, I'm not saying do it or don't do it. I'm saying honor your path. And if you're drawn to it and you're called to it, and especially if that medicine, that particular medicine is calling you in some way, maybe there's something there to be explored, but do your homework. Just do your
Yeah.
homework. Don't rush into it. There's no need. Spirit's eternal. You're eternal, you know,
Right.
so don't rush into these things, and know that whatever suffering is there that you want to alleviate yourself of, if anything, will probably be amplified. It doesn't make it disappear or go away, right? It amplifies you to more. So back to your friend, for example, you know, an analogy I really like to use with people who've had a peak experience and are even still in it and want to hold on to it, is the difference between an orgasm and that warm feeling after love when you're in love with somebody, right? We are not built to 24/7 withhold orgasm level energy. We would explode and die. You know, the French
Right.
call it la petite mort, right? The little death. I mean, we would explode and die if we were in orgasmic energy all the time. So we can have experiences of it, right? We can have the wow, and then what happens after orgasm? Things simmer down, right? The body starts to kind of integrate. We start to come back into ourselves, and hopefully we're there with somebody that we really like, and we've had a shared nice experience, and we have these warm, loving feelings with them through that experience. And you know, that's what I liken to integrating, a good, healthy integration of experiences afterwards. It can be like that in love, warm relationship, that it's a relationship. You have to cultivate it. It doesn't just magically be fabulous for the rest of your life. You know, you still have to work on it and give it love and tend to it. But um it, doing that also, it's a cycle. It's a catch 22. As you carry on with that, you pave even more of the way to then have those orgasm experiences again as well. But the warning there is a lot of people who've had a peak experience can get caught in a trap, and it is a trap of, I need to get back there. I need to constantly get back there and recreate that. And what happens then is it's very hard, like highs on a drug, like highs in an orgasm, it's very hard to recreate a particular high in a moment, right? The gift is in, thank you very much. Thank you so much for that experience. And if I get to experience it again, that'd be a wonderful thing. I can cultivate my life and my mind and my body so that I'm open to it happening again if the great universe, helps me to do that. Um, but if we're constantly chasing the peak, then again, we've lost the point, which is the application. It's the embodiment. It's all the stuff that we were talking about before. Embody it, bring it into your body and live it, bring the best of those peak moments, which is like, maybe if in your friend's experience, maybe it's just this pure ecstatic loving of everybody. Well, great. Even if you don't have the same frequency of it in your day-to-day life as that peak experience, how can you bring the golden nugget of that into your lived experience each day? If someone's really pissing you off, okay, great opportunity to practice. How can you tap in to that amazing state and bring that knowing in that moment of, I know that I can be all loving. I know that that is possible. So how can I tap into the biggest, most loving, open part of me in my heart? As this person mentioned, they're a heart space person. How can I tap into the biggest wisdom of my heart space so that I can be in this challenging moment in perhaps a way that is different to how I might have reacted or responded beforehand? Maybe I'll just do something differently. Maybe I won't do anything at all and I'll just feel the vibe. And maybe that in itself will shift something in the moment. We don't know. That's the cool thing about it. We don't actually know. We have to put these things into practice. And it's like a big science lab. Our life is a science lab. As we do experiments, we find out, because the other person or that environment will let us know, was that a good experiment or not? Again, good or not, was that an experiment that we want to repeat or not? Did it have a positive outcome or not? Again, we can be neutral about it. Be a scientist, be an explorer, and be curious. Just put on that hat, investigate, and try it out. Try it out, and that helps hugely with our ability to let go of self-judgment and of things like guilt and remorse and feeling that we have to forgive all kinds of things. Is like, look, if we just be curious and we try and apply ourselves as best and openly and authentically as we can in the moment, you can't expect any more than that. I mean, that is a very good level of human functioning. It's a wonderful level of human functioning. We, and others, drop the perfectionism. I'm saying this of myself and others, right? Because it's a thing. It's okay to let that go and to just be in the mess of this human experience.
I heard you say that today, and I wanted to have you talk about that. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll just add a little PSA here again to reiterate. I have a fascination around plant medicine and what that does and how it opens you up, and the spirit in the realm of the spiritually transformative experience, not for recreational, for me anyway. My curiosity lies in the spiritual realm of it all, but I will just send a PSA because one of my uh, best friends just crossed over because he did not share with any of us that he was I, bipolar. Clearly, I mean, it's very clear to me he wasn't diagnosed and wasn't getting treated, and just thought he could handle it and was taking different kinds of people. It was like he was hanging out with people and he was kind of recreationally, not just taking different pills, and ended up having a psychotic episode and like losing his mind and running off into the woods, and accidentally his life was taken in that way. So I just want to say that yes, I'm definitely not I mean, I think you have to be so responsible with these things, because people can just sign up to go to these ayahuasca retreats. But that story that I know you were referencing, I remember there was like a medicine woman that was murdered because somebody was bipolar or schizophrenic, And when he took the medicine, it triggered an episode and he ended up, not to be dark in this beautiful, in the middle of this, I just want to say that as much as I am fascinated and I think it's really interesting to explore, and just, I want to reiterate, please be careful with it just until you know that you're being treated by a doctor, you're not taking drugs that will interfere, you're making sure you're not schizophrenic or bipolar. I just wanted to throw that out there because I do talk about this a lot out of curiosity and that sort of thing, but I don't want it to seem like I'm saying everybody go do this. I do think it's so important to make sure that you're medically cleared, and that, not that maybe you want to tell your doctor what you're doing, but just make sure that you are not on anything, or that you're taking care of your mental health first. And again, we'll reiterate that these states can be achieved without dying, without without taking drugs. It, you never know. Even my guest yesterday, Melissa Denise, just kept praying for one, and she was given one. If the time is right, it will happen. So I just appreciate so much your insight, your wisdom, and the services that you provide that I think are so important, because even having spoken to so many out of body near death experiencers and even people who have had DMT experiences, they've all said, even my friend that we were just talking about that had the DMT journey, he's like, now the problem is, how do I just do life now?
Yeah,
He's like, I was in a Zoom meeting today for work, like, why do what? Like, I don't
exactly.
care about this,
Yes.
and so I think it's so important to address that integration. And
Yeah.
also, it isn't easy, also not to glamorize the near death experience, because a lot of people come back pretty traumatized. A lot of people come back with trouble assimilating. And that's where beautiful healers like you come in, and coaches, and that are really helping to help people assimilate, because it is important. This is important. This
It's
place.
hugely important, because when we manage to integrate, the experience is just the beginning. You've just opened the doorway. And like your friend said, now what? That's the correct question. Now, exactly. Now what? You're right, my friend. So you've opened a doorway. And the journey of integration is so important, because now you get to discover what gifts come through. Now you get to align even more with the pathway that feels right for you, that is energizing for you, that feels good. Now your magic starts to come through you. You start to walk the world feeling good about things, fulfilled. And I mean fulfilled at like the soul level, like you wake up in the morning and you have a smile on your face from the deepest part of you, right? Like soul happy. Because you know that your days are purposeful and what you're contributing is something greater than yourself. So this is a natural progression that comes, but it takes time to, one, integrate the experience, then understand, now who am I through this, right? So reconnect with ourselves. You haven't changed completely from who you were before. There's always going to be core threads that go through, but you need to understand, as a result of a powerful transformation, what are those key aspects that are being highlighted through you that relate directly to your gifts, and how you can live your life, energetically and with your optimum being and in your best service. Like, why are you here? Your dharma, it relates to all of that.
Yeah.
But you've got to understand you, because you have individual unique gifts and quirks, and that's not stuff to throw away at this stage. That's actually stuff to step even deeper into, because again, you and I, Shannon, we might share similar messages about things, but the way you're going to communicate it out and resonate it out in your frequency is going to be slightly different to how I do it in mine. And so we're going to end up having conversations with different people because we're striking different resonances, even if the core message is the same, right?
Yeah.
So this is why we can all have these profoundly transformative experiences and tap into core truths about life and existence. And then we can gather ourselves together and do the human trod and do it our way, because we each are going to touch lives immediately around us and in the wider ripples. And we have this beautiful gift of technology now that we can do it instantly like that around the world. We have ways to ripple out, and we never know who that ripple is going to touch and when or how, and what they're going through. So all you can do is carry on being the best of you in your embodiment, right? So I actually think those experiences are the beginning, and a really exciting beginning, because here starts the next chapter of your life. That's fabulous. And ultimately, why is this important? Because we can help each other out. Because again, it comes back to, we can make this a more beautiful existence on this planet, where people don't have to feel that they have to turn to substances, to fill an empty void or a hole, where people don't have to end their lives because, they're so lost or confused or in pain about something, where people, have to retreat into themselves and hide who they think they are because at some point in their life they've been devalued or told that that's wrong. There's people are walking around with so much pain, right? So that's one level of how it can be addressed. And in addition to that, boy, are there some systems on this planet that are really messed up. We are so dysfunctional as a species in terms of how we are doing this collective thing. I mean, we are so parasitic, we're killing our Mama Earth home. What creature does that? Even parasites understand that you take your fill and then you drop off, right? We haven't understood that yet. We are killing our own home as well as ourselves. How on earth did that happen? How did we go so wrong in who we are? So, why are these experiences important? Because they can bring us back to equilibrium. They can bring us back to health. They can bring us back to balance, because they're so simple and they're in alignment with core principles of how this cosmos operates, with how creation itself operates. We can just bring ourselves back, and then we just operate better. You're in better health. You have better energy. You have better relationships. You make better decisions. It doesn't mean other stuff doesn't happen. Of course it does, that, you have to deal with life. We all have to deal with death and taxes. So it goes. Or maybe we don't have to deal with taxes one day. Again, that's one of our silly constructs, right?
Right.
But death, I think, we're still dealing with, and we'll be dealing with for a long time until we figure out something completely different with that. But we can do better, that's my point. And so it's a sad state when these profound experiences, when we have them and we're told that you're psychotic, something's wrong with you, you have a broken brain, it's all in your imagination, that's just woo woo, you know um no, no, there's more to it, there's more
Yeah.
to it, and we need to be actively encouraging people to integrate, harness, and celebrate what these experiences are about. Yeah, that, I know,
I do. I
that.
was just imagining in my mind that emoji, the yes emoji with the two hands, oh my ears started to itch. Thank you, Dr. Nicole Gruel. I will put your information in the description below, but where can we find you? And is there anything you want to talk about that you have coming up, events or services or anything you'd like to share?
Sure, thank you. Look, if you are someone who has had an experience and you're wondering what's next, exactly what we've been talking about, I recently released a course exactly for that, called Spirit Gifts 101. So that's where we go through. I break it down. I've created a roadmap, and so it's the map I wish I had when I was fumbling through the spiritual wilderness for decades, trying out different things. And I just wanted that big old answer in the sky to say, Nicole, this is the way, and this is what you have to do. And my path was very eclectic. So I, out of my own frustration and realizations on my journey, I've constructed something that can, in a way, speed up the process, or at least make it much clearer for people that these are some of the major steps that happen after a spiritual awakening or after a profound spiritual experience. And if you want to embody that more and understand how you can be more in alignment with what's most natural to you, your core self, then that's who this is for. And of course, I'd love to welcome you along. So I'll give you the link to that where people can find out more about that. I have a few books as well. So my most recent is The Power of Notes. And again, I'll share that link with your listeners as well. You can download a free version, PDF of that book. You can get a signed copy from me. I have a couple of other books if you want to hear a more personal story and that dark side of the chakras. This one's available on Amazon. This is Dancing with Dragons. This is very personal. When I was writing this stuff, I never intended it for it to be a book. It's more like a journal spiel, and I just had to get my stuff out. But after it was out, I had people say to me, Nicole, you have to share that because other people can benefit from, it's like a mirror, and it was amazing. I'll never forget this woman. Someone just random came up to me and she had my book and she's like, Nicole, thank you. And every single page of the book had a highlight on it somewhere. And this is a woman who had been through like the most horrific traumas early in life. And she was using it as something to do her own work. And of course, my story is completely different to hers, but it provided a mirror and a safe space in her own safe time. She mostly did it in the bathtub, where she was going through, and just, understanding from an external lens, having a different way of understanding a personal experience. So this is the beauty, of texts and things like that, resources that we can do. So yes, so there's a few of those. Those are the ways to get in touch. And the last one I'll share with you is a group that I have for those of you still on Facebook. It's called Agents of Awesome. So you can just find us there. And yeah, I share stuff in there. It's a lovely bunch of, I think we're up to 800 plus people,
I
most
would
of
like to be
whom
in
are the
there.
types of people
I
who've
was
had
just
these
talking,
experiences.
yeah, I was talking, well, I mean, I was talking with a friend today about Facebook, and she's like, because I had this encounter with some haters, and she said, I hate Facebook. And I said, I know, but then more of me loves it because of those communities, the IANDS communities, the ability to share the podcast and just share memories. And I also love looking at people's babies and life events personally. I that I wouldn't necessarily be in touch with all the time, but it has so much value in those, in the abilities. All my mediumship groups are in there. Just so many ways to connect, and so many of my friends I've met on Facebook that I
Yeah.
never, this friend that said she hates it, we met on Facebook in a private group for people that suffer from reflux. So like, and it turned out we had everything in common and we're like soulmates. So as much as there's just a lot of toxicity in there, it's also such a handy tool, which sometimes I'm like, I hate to support some of this stuff, but then at the same time,
Yeah.
how beneficial it really is. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your time and your energy. This was so enlightening, but also just so nice because you're such a lovely person to spend time with. And I know that you are just doing such great work, and anyone who gets to work with you is so lucky and I know will benefit greatly.
Thank you, Shannon. That's so lovely. And thank you for inviting me to hang out with your community and to make the connect. It's a real pleasure. So,
It is my
and
honor.
like I said from the beginning, when you reached out, I love the name of your podcast.
Thank you.
I love that. So magic is real,
It
folks. It
is.
is.
It is.
It is. Get into it. Do it. And it's not like you have to walk around with a stick or anything, but it's the essence. It's the life force, energy, and essence. We are magic ultimately. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you.